It's mock draft time for the San Francisco 49ers Peacock mock number 1.0. We're going to do it live. We're going to do the simulator, and I've got my plan. Might they move around the board a little bit? I think so. Coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker with you at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Love our everydayers. Let us know you stop by. If you're on YouTube, hit the thumbs up. Tell a friend about Locked On 49ers. If you're new to the program, welcome. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast so you can hang out with us all draft season and into the regular season and hopefully next postseason long here on Locked On 49ers every day as we do. It's mock draft time, Croc. And so we're going to get into a little mock draft. This is going to be my personal baby. So I'm going to be the GM. Croc going to be the assistant GM on this one. Next time it'll be the Croc mock, and Peacock will be the assistant GM, assisting Eric Crocker in doing whatever he wants to do here. One quick thing first, and I want to drop our big board on the 49 or on the listeners, our 49ers centric big board here. I've watched a lot more prospects than this, but this is sort of our deep dive prospects, the ones we've done on the podcast. And once we make them podcast official, we put them on our big board, and we're ranking the prospects right now as it pertains to the San Francisco 49ers. No quarterbacks on there yet. But the latest two that we've done, Croc, is Will Johnson, the corner out of Michigan, and Kenneth Grant, the defensive tackle out of Michigan. And is there a spot on the big board that you think they would go? This is the list so far of the now 18 players we've done deep dives on for the 2025 draft. Abdul Carter is 1. Travis Hunter is 2. Those guys are very close, and they're 1 and 2, and they're in a blue chip category of their own. Then after that is Mason Graham, defensive tackle from Michigan, number 3, and I think there might even be a little tier after him to the rest of them. And to be honest with you, there's a lot of very similar grades here, and we're going to have to go back over these with the fine-tooth comb later and after the combine and really find out what the separators are and the cluster busters here for a lot of these prospects. Starting at number 4 on our list, Josh Simmons, offensive tackle out of Ohio State. We've got the LSU offensive tackle Will Campbell, 5. Walter Nolan, DT out of Ole Miss, 6. Mike Green, edge rusher out of Marshall, is 7. We've got James Pierce, the edge rusher from Tennessee, 8. Then Armand Membo and Kelvin Banks, 2 offensive tackles that could play inside in the NFL, but might stick as tackle as well at 9 and 10. We've got Malachi Starks at 11, currently safety out of Georgia. Tyler Warren, tight end out of Penn State, 12. Then Jalen Walker and Michael Williams, 2, who I think both edge rushers in the NFL. Walker played a little off ball in college. Michael Williams played a little more kind of inside-ish in college. I think they both kind of play a little different role in the NFL. Both interesting prospects out of Georgia, like a lot of these Georgia prospects are. Huge athletes that kind of play a different role once they get to the NFL. So a lot of projection with those guys. They're 13 and 14. You got Shamar Stewart at 15, and they got Ashton Genty at 16. Genty's a stud player. He's just a running back. That's why he's at the end of the list here. And Croc, with that list, as I laid it out, and there will be probably, I'm guaranteed there will be changes to this between now and the draft, but that's where we see him right now after our deep dives. The latest 2, Will Johnson and Kenneth Grant, before we do this mock, where do you put them? Do we need to wait to see what it looks like?
I do like him more than James Pierce. Now, again, I like Pierce, but I like him more than Pierce. Once you start to get around Mike Green.
Right. That's where I was going to go.
I got a little trouble with that, but
I think maybe even Will Johnson deserves to be at number 7 ahead of Mike Green and James Pierce, just because the fit for the 49ers. I don't know if they want to go 245, 250 with edge guys in the first round. And I think there's a really high floor on Will Johnson, but I think the combine will determine a lot, because if he runs mid 4.4s or faster, he's not going to be around for the 49ers anyway. And if he runs slow, maybe the 49ers wouldn't want to draft him at 11. So he's a really interesting player for me, Will Johnson, but the tape is really good. I would probably put him right ahead of Mike Green as far as a prospect. But again, these prospects are all so close that I think there's a lot of tiebreakers. Need would be a tiebreaker. How do they work out? Medical, character stuff, the meetings. I think there's a lot of possibilities for tiebreakers, because again, 4 through 15 and now 16, 17, 18 they're very close grades.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to go
argue with. I think we were thinking around along the same lines, having him in the right range.
Yeah.
I won't argue with you on that. And I like Mike. I like Mike Green, but I'm not opposed to putting the corner a slot above him.
Right now, a little cleaner prospect, but again, very, very close there. And then so that leaves us with Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle out of Michigan. I think he's much lower on the list for me. I would argue he goes around 16 ahead of Shamar Stewart. He's really in that kind of Williams Stewart range where I wish there was a little bit more production, but there's a lot of traits to work with.
With Williams, and again, a lot of traits, a lot of things to work with. Yeah, I'd have him probably just a slot ahead of him because at least I know what Grant is and what that's going to look like at the next level. I think with like a guy like Williams, you may be banking on him taking like the next step as a pass rusher. But Kenneth Grant, it's like, well, I know exactly what he is right now. Super motor. He is a freak, terrific athlete. Talks about being light on his feet. You know, I'm watching plays of him chasing skilled players down like 30 yards up the field. This is a really big guy. Has to probably develop a little bit more of a pass rush plan. But just from an ability standpoint, how big he is and knowing right now, man, he's a stout guy, would be really stout in that middle. I'm comfortable knowing exactly what he is. So, yeah, I like him ahead of Williams.
All right, this is the big board we're going to be working with as we go through this mock draft, Croc. Now, let me lay out here what my plan is for the mock draft. And we're going to be at the mercy of the PFF mock draft simulator. We're going to use this one this time. Maybe we'll change it up, use some different simulators, you know, to kind of have a little bit different rankings and kind of at the mercy of the simulator and how things might go and how they might offer some trades and those types of things. I just think the PFF simulator is a little cleaner and looks a little better for those viewers on the podcast. And it's a nice little, whoever did the design of it did a great job over there at PFF. So Croc, looking at the list of our big board and some of the players that are on there, being that those guys are all so tight and there's going to be a couple of quarterbacks too. And so we're talking about, we're guaranteed from drafting amongst not nearly guaranteed drafting amongst our top 9 guys if 2 quarterbacks go in the top 11 picks, which would be Carter, Hunter, Graham, Simmons, Campbell, Nolan, Johnson, Green, Pierce, Membo. And
real quick, also, there's a couple of receivers we have not talked about at all.
Yes.
Luther Burden, guys like McMillan, who McMillan is a very similar prospect to probably Drake London, would you say? And Drake London is a guy who went top 10.
Yeah, he was, I think, at number 8 overall pick. So he's another guy that could go up there. Burden kind of goes in that range, later mid, early teens, around 11, 10, 12, 15, kind of sneaking towards 20 at times. And so the 49ers can trade back here. And the reason I would say to trade back is because, again, those grades are so similar. And I want to throw this out there too, and this idea about the offensive line. So I like Simmons, and you and I both have Simmons as our top tackle. We think he's the cleanest left tackle prospect. But then he's got the knee injury, and he won't be able to work out at the combine. Medicals will be big. Who was it? Jonathan Brooks, the running back, had a torn ACL, and he was supposed to be ready for training camp last year. Then he tore his ACL again after not even coming back until the very end of the season, right? And so
he's the one that went to the Panthers, right?
Yeah, running back to the Panthers. Yeah, and I think he was the highest running back drafted last year, and he didn't play. And now he tore his ACL again, right? Now he plays a different position, but still, and the internet doctors out there can tell me if the the patellar tendon tear that Josh Simmons has, is that better or is that maybe possibly worse than an ACL? Because people come back from ACLs all the time now, and you kind of know the timeline. Is patellar tendon worse? His agent, Drew Rosenhaus, who, let's be honest, not someone you might want to trust in this situation, says he's going to be ready by training camp. But, the medical is going to be huge on Josh Simmons. And again, even if he's our top guy there, that knocks him down a little bit, not knowing about the medical. So I think we could move down. And here's the other thing, Croc, I'm going to drop on you next. Maybe there's an answer for the 49ers to draft the defensive lineman in the first round and still have their offensive tackle of the future. So let's start this mock draft under those pretenses, and I'll talk about that player as well before we get started. Next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip, you can still bet on that fourth quarter comeback. You can stay in the action, and if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. And You love using FanDuel, their live betting features. It's so fun to play along with the game because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether you're backing your own team or you're looking for a late game rally or you just want to get in and get involved and football season's over and you need a little juice in your life, right? So you never miss your chance at FanDuel. Plus, you can still bet on the NFL. You can bet on the Niners to win the next Super Bowl, and you can still bet on those tasty draft props. And we might inform you on what some of those bets could potentially be here on Locked On 49ers, because I think you can get an edge on the house with those draft props. And right now, new customers at FanDuel can bet just $5, and if you win, you get $150 in bonus bets. So visit FanDuel.com today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. What if I told you the 49ers already have their offensive tackle of the future, and it's one Dominic Puni? Could this be the way the 49ers still draft defensive line early, have a future offensive tackle, then you could fortify the interior later in the draft and not have to utilize that 11th pick, or even if you trade down, a later first-round pick? And the reason I say that is because Dominic Puni has longer arms and is more athletic than the guy playing next to him at right tackle currently, in Colton McKivitz. And the 49ers aren't a team that really, I don't think they care as much as maybe some other teams about, you got to be 34-inch arm length to be an offensive tackle. And so it's like, okay, well, maybe Will Campbell's a fit. Well, if Will Campbell's a fit, why isn't Dominic Puni a fit? You've got found money in Dominic Puni. He could kick out to right tackle. You could play him at left guard this year, kick him out with Trent Williams next year, or whenever Trent Williams retires, be a left tackle. He's played all those positions. He's versatile. He played on the left side in college. So that's my plan right now, is I want to match up defensive line, whether it's interior, edge rusher, big bodied guy, speed rusher. I want to match up defensive line with best player available in the first round if the trade offers are there. And maybe even trade up. Who knows? So let's get into this mock draft here. And
real quick before you get into that, one thing that people kind of forget a little bit, McKivitz was drafted and played guard right away.
Right.
And he was someone who kind of transitioned by need, kind of kick out at tackle and started off rough. But as we saw last year, I mean, a lot of people don't want to admit it, but he had a really good season. He
was not the biggest problem on the 49ers last year, that's for sure. And he actually was worse at guard than he ended up being at tackle. He was a college tackle, kind of failed at guard. He actually got cut, I think, at one point, right? And then and came back and ended up being a starting offensive tackle. So if McKivitz can do it, I think Puni might be able to do it. And if you're going to draft a guy that's kind of got that same profile as Puni anyway, why not give Puni a shot, use that found money, fortify the interior, and Puni's your tackle of the future. So let's start the draft there. And we are now rolling into this mock draft. I'm going to pause here really quick at around the Jaguars at 5, because I think the one, maybe not the one. Is there anybody you would trade up for, Croc, in the draft?
First, I want to start by saying I just talked about McMillan potentially going pick 8, pick 9, pick 10, kind of in that range. He went number 4 overall to the New England Patriots, who I could see the Patriots saying, hey, we need McMillan. They probably were banking on Travis Hunter being there. Hunter got drafted number 3 overall to the New York Giants here. So the Patriots are like, well, we need a receiver for our guy Drake May, and they will win McMillan. So he's off the clock. Now you're looking at a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars. What are they anticipating? What do I anticipate them do? Hey, man, you paid a lot of money for Trevor Lawrence. It hasn't been great, but you got to start off by helping him building in the trenches. Maybe they go offensive line here. I could see that happening.
By the way, it went Ward Sanders, quarterback, 1-2 in this mock draft, then Travis Hunter, then Ted McMillan. And I mean, to be honest with you, in this scenario, I'd probably be trying to trade up and be making phone calls for Abdul Carter right now. And he's going to come off the board very soon in the next couple picks. But I'm going to wait on that. So Mason Graham, Abdul Carter, those would probably be the guys. But I'm going to try to trade down, I think, in this mock, unless, something else happens. So let's see how far this goes. And this will resume the draft a little bit here. Well, now this is getting silly. Abdul Carter still hasn't been drafted. So that's what you get with the look. And you're going to be shocked by what really happens in the NFL draft. I would be shocked if this actually happened. I'd be making calls to try to trade.
I feel like we've seen this a lot, where maybe a guy that is super talented and he kind of, oh man, that's the biggest steal ever, right? But the guys that got drafted ahead of him, they're very talented as well. So yeah, we do anticipate Abdul Carter going in the top 5. But when you look at how this has played out so far, not a lot of surprises. Maybe James Pierce going to the Saints, but I mean, Pierce is a freak in his own right, being a long, athletic edge rusher. So I mean, these are things that it feels kind of far-fetched, but it might not be as far-fetched as people think.
All right, we're going to play this out to the 49ers pick then. I mean, Abdul Carter's still there. That's just not going to go. That's just not going to
But you got to go, Abdul. But okay, or we could do this. We could say, you know what? Abdul Carter is there, but we don't anticipate him being there. But maybe a guy like Mason Graham would be there, and I think that would be even more of a no-brainer pick for the 49ers.
I think there's a definite possibility that Mason Graham could be there. I think there's zero chance that Abdul Carter could be there. And if this plays out this way, I mean, I think Mason Graham has to be the pick, right?
You know, I have a love affair for Josh Simmons, but the injury and stuff like that, if you have a very healthy Mason Graham there, I'd have to take that, especially with the way you laid it out. Hey, Dominic Puni, he may be our right tackle or left tackle of the future. So if we're kind of going in that direction, I think the obvious pick here is Mason Graham, who first few watches really liked him, continued to watch him, saw more that I liked when I was watching him next to Grant. So
we're going to operate under the idea that Abdul Carter, no way he's fallen. Mason Graham could get close to the 49ers. I think that is plausible and probably best case right now as we look at this thing, because he's not going to be probably a combine superstar, but the tape is good. I think he's got a high floor and he's got a good ceiling as well. I think he's the type of player that the 49ers would like. And we're going to go Mason Graham here. So we're not going to do the trade down, but a good player fell to our lap here. And we're going to go Mason
Graham. You wanted
Graham.
to do the trade down. Like you went into it thinking, the guys that I love aren't going to be there, but there is depth at the D line. I'll be able to trade back. But Graham fell in your lap.
You know what? Actually, you know what, Croc? You're right. I was going to trade down. I'm going to trade down anyway, because that's the scenario I want to play with. So, Graham and Carter, they're going to be gone. In reality, you're fighting to get up to get Abdul Carter if he gets close. Mason Graham, if he gets really close, or if he falls to you at 11, I think that's a really good pick. So in reality, it would be that selection here. But I wanted to do the trade down. So I'm going to stick with the trade down scenario if we get an offer. So let's see what the offers are out there. We could go back with the Indianapolis Colts, pick 14. They are interested. I'm even okay going back to pick 17. Let's take a look at who's on the board one more time. Sorry, we're going to go faster, guys. We're not doing 7 rounds anyway. We'll get through maybe 4 rounds here, and we'll start moving faster. But I really want to talk through this scenario. So, whoever goes in the top 10, obviously there's going to be some slam dunk picks, and you just stay and you pick. But I wanted to do the trade down scenario, so we're doing the trade down scenario here. I think maybe pick 17 to the Bengals would kind of be the spot that might even be a sweet spot here. Potentially. So let me look at who's on the board. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, plenty of talent left on the board, I think, to move down to pick 17. So let's talk with the Bengals about pick 17, and that'll give us a better return than the Colts. And so what would it take? A second round pick at least to move up that far, right? Would it be a future first? No, they're not interested in that. So a second and a fourth, 55% chance, it says, just a second and a fourth to move up to pick 11. Is that worth more?
I like it.
I think this is the trade offer right here, and we'll see if they take it.
All right, let's do it.
So we've got pick 17, 49. So the Bengals' first and second round picks, and their fourth at 117, and they're moving up from 17 to 11. Niners are on the clock at pick 17. And
Walter Nolan
is there.
This is your mock.
Membo is there.
This is your mock.
I can tell. I mean, you're my assistant GM. You have an important role in this organization, Croc. Is it Walter Nolan?
Walter Nolan is the guy that we identified as a 49er guy. He's kind of one of those penetrating defensive tackles for a team that wants to run wide 9 and get up the field right now. He's that. He has a high motor. He has pass rush moves. Michael Williams wouldn't be a bad pick. Shoot, you got Ibuka, the receiver from Ohio State. I think he's terrific, and Ashton Genty's still there. But I think for the 49ers, Kenneth Grant there, I like Walter Nolan more than Kenneth Grant. I'd have a hard time passing on Nolan right here.
Walter Nolan is the pick for the 49ers at pick 17 after trading down. Got some extra draft picks. Let's spend some of those draft picks in this 49ers mock draft next. All right. This is why I like to trade down, because you go down 6 spots, you're going to get a guy with a very similar grade than you were going to get unless something crazy happens like Abdul Carter or Mason Graham. And I just don't think it's in the cards for someone like Abdul Carter to get out of the top 5 in this draft. So we're doing the trade down scenario here, and it is Walter Nolan at pick 17, defensive tackle. I think he could be an explosive playmaker for the 49ers defensive line. And man, do they need some talent infused to the interior of their defensive line. And now we're sitting on the clock. Got a couple of picks here coming up quick. Got pick 43 and that Bengals pick 49. And Siobhan Revelle, cornerback out of East Carolina, is the highest graded player here on this list. None of our players that we have graded so far are left for us here. Jalen Walker's there, but that's also an outlier in this PFF system, because Jalen Walker is going to go in the first round, and just I think it's Trevor Sikkema that does all the rankings, former Locked On host. He just has Jalen Walker ranked a lot lower than everybody else, so I think it's unlikely he's going to be there. But if he was there, I would have no problem taking that pick, especially not going edge in the first round. But again, I don't think that's realistic. So we're looking at Jihad Campbell from Alabama, JT Tuimoloau, Tyler Booker, guard from Alabama, Omar Norman Lott, another interior defensive lineman. He's more of that 3-tech penetrator. So with Nolan. And here's the thing, is there's a lot of depth at defensive tackle. So as we go through this, we might find after doing some of these mocks, Croc, that maybe defensive tackle is a position you wait on anyway, because you can get a guy a little bit later. And there's a lot of depth in this class at that position. So if the 49ers are going to give someone like, in this scenario, Dominic Puni potentially an opportunity to play tackle, well, now we're fortifying the guards, right? If you're just looking at pure guards, Tyler Booker might be the best guard in the entire draft, and he's there for you in the second round. So that's intriguing to me. I like Tuimoloau as well. He's a big athletic end out of Ohio State. Jihad Campbell's a freak like they have at Alabama in their front sevens. Siobhan Revelle is actually a really, really talented guy as well. I love the Siobhan Revelle story, by the way, and we got to move on quickly here. But Siobhan Revelle, I think, went to East Carolina out of like JUCO, like just on a whim, like last minute, just decided to drive overnight and go try out. And then he like ran 4.3 and jumped 40 inches, and they gave him a scholarship like on the spot. And like, he's turned out to be a stud for them. So I love that story, especially, my co-host here, Eric Crocker, had an interesting path, JUCO and the way his football world goes. So I think you could probably have some idea what that feeling is like, to like kind of be in limbo, and then all of a sudden you end up, oh shoot, okay, I'm in an NFL training camp.
Well, with 2 picks at 43 and another pick at 49, 2 picks in the second round, I think that is an opportunity. Like, if you want to address the cornerback position, you are losing. Now, corner isn't a huge need for the 49ers, because your nickel Deommodore Lenoir has so much versatility, being able to play inside out. You drafted Green, Ronaldo Green, last season. He was terrific. But one thing I've talked about with the 49ers, like, who's the freaks in the secondary? Who's the freak athlete? Well, so Revelle, to me, he would be intriguing, because that gives you an opportunity to say, hey, we got our book outside corners with Green and Revelle, and then you have our nickel. And now you're talking about potentially having a corner group like not as much high-end talent, but the Cleveland Browns a couple years ago with Denzel Ward, Newsome, and then the kid out of Texas A&M, the cornerback. Like, just having a stout group, and what that does for guys, like what it did for why am I blanking on his name? The big edge rusher, Myles Garrett, and what that can now do for a guy like Nick Bosa. So if you want to go coverage heavy and really solidify your secondary, you can go that route. If you want to go maybe the linebacker route, because you're saying, well, we're not going to have Dre Greenlaw potentially, right? And let's see, somehow comes back, but you're not going to have him. How much do you love D. Winters? I think D. Winters kind of duking it out for most of the season with Campbell lets you know they're maybe not in love with D. Winters. So maybe a linebacker here at the top of the draft to play next to Fred Warner is kind of the long-term plan.
I'm going to make another trade, Croc. The Dallas Cowboys sitting behind the 49ers at pick 44. I don't want to lose the ability to double up on a couple of these talents, and I don't know if the guys I like the most are going to be available at pick number 49. So I'm going to spend that extra pick. Niners got an extra 4th, and an extra second. I'm going to package those together to move up from 49 to 44. Niners are going to pick back-to-back right now, 43 and 44.
I like it.
2 of Siobhan Revelle, Jihad Campbell, and Tyler Booker. 2 of those 3. I'm going to pick the 3. You pick which 2 it is.
You know, I mean, we've talked a lot about building up the trenches for the 49ers. You got to go guard here, because even if, you love the guard that the 49ers drafted last year, there's still another spot where Aaron Banks is vacating. So I think you got to go Tyler Booker at guard.
I'm with you. And we laid it out, right? Puni's going to be the tackle. Like, instead of drafting Will Campbell, give Puni the opportunity to be that tackle instead. And maybe you get even a better guard, and you get the best guard in the draft potentially in the second round instead, because those interior guys, you can get those guys later. So now we got Booker, and he's kind of a freak. He can rush the passer as well. He's another one of those big linebackers that can kind of do it all. He's got a good run defense grade. He's got a good coverage grade. He's got a good pass rush grade. He's 6'3", 244. He's a junior. He's a Alabama linebacker, and the 49ers have gone that route, and it hasn't gone that great though. Croc, are you afraid of going Alabama back to back? He goes Siobhan Revelle. Revelle, by the way, is coming off an injury as well. That could be the tiebreaker.
Oh, so Campbell, who have the 49ers drafted from Alabama? Like, everybody goes to Reuben Foster, and Reuben Foster on the field was everything that they wanted him to be. Reuben Foster off of the field was everything that they don't want him to be. And they knew that they were taking a swing at that. And I remember hearing the head coach,
Saban.
Nick Saban. I remember hearing Nick Saban talk about, like, hey, if you're looking for, he used the word like candy striper, or if you're looking for a candy striper, whatever the word like, he's not that, but if you want a hell of a football player, he's that. So I feel like he was very upfront, honest. He said that to the media during the draft process. 49ers said, hey, we're going to take a swing on him. We can save him. They couldn't save him. I don't think Campbell is somebody that needs saving, So, and then the other guy, the tight end, Kamala too. I mean, you and I could have told the 49ers not to draft Kamala too in the third round.
So we said as much as soon as they made the pick.
Yeah. Alabama, they still are loaded with a lot of talent. Nobody's complaining about a lot of the other guys that they've gotten drafted, whether it's receivers, outside of what happened with Ruggs, some of their defensive backs. A lot of guys have played and been very impactful. I think Jihad Campbell, he fits an area for the 49ers where you got to get younger. You have to get an impact player, and you have an opportunity to get that player at a premier program. So I'd go Campbell here, as much as it pains me not to go cornerback.
And I'm with you on this, because I think he's a high level player, and you get cheaper and younger and more healthy at the position too by letting Dre Greenlaw walk, and cheaper is key right now with what the 49ers are dealing with, and younger and faster and all those things. So yeah, Jihad Campbell is the pick. This is becoming up the middle draft. D tackle, guard, linebacker. But again, Jihad Campbell can give you something off the edge, and who knows, maybe he's even a player that you feature as a pass rusher too. He's got that kind of ability and that kind of talent, and he's got some size to him too, as well as athleticism. So we're going Jihad Campbell at pick number 44, and now we're going to drop all the way down to pick 75 in round 3, and I think that's where we might leave it, because A, we're running out of time, but B, it's just a really good exercise in playing with scenarios and what the 49ers could potentially get if they stand pat, if they trade up, if they trade back. This was the trade back scenario that I wanted to try out. And to be honest with you, I think they got a ton of value, and they got a free player out of this, essentially. Croc, right? The 49ers turned 11 into an extra pick in the top 50 to add to their defense in Jihad Campbell. So now pick 75.
I know we're not big on taking running backs in the third round. It hasn't worked out quite well for the 49ers, but Judkins might be a little different though. Like, he's an explosive back.
I like Travion Henderson a lot. Judkins I like a lot too. I mean, both those guys are talented. And look, I will tell you this. I'm not against a third round running back. I'm just against it how many resources the 49ers currently have put to that position. They got the highest paid running back in the league that they also trade a whole bunch of draft picks for. So I don't think they should need to do this. And if there's someone else that's as good or better on the board, I think I'd probably go that direction, another position. But again, third round, that's kind of when you start talking about running backs for me. The right guy has to be there, is Quinshawn Judkins. that guy, maybe you could talk me into it. And looking at the rest of the big board and who's kind of available here, I think Elijah Arroyo, tight end out of Miami, big athletic tight end. Azariah Thomas, cornerback from Florida State. Charles
Isaiah
Grant,
Bond, speedy receiver.
Yes, out of Texas.
Very talented. He was a transfer from, I want to say, Alabama to Texas, but he's a terrific prospect.
Nick Imanwari, who is a really large athletic safety out of South Carolina. The 49ers could go that way. Mason Taylor, who's Jason Taylor's kid, built similarly too. Maybe not quite as tall, but tight end out of LSU, plays on the other side of the ball. Trey Harris, a really good wide receiver prospect. Harold Fannin, tight end. He's still on the board as well. Fannon's an interesting one, man, because he's undersized. He's 6'3", 230. He's listed 6'4". I think he's like 6'3.5" or something like that at the Senior Bowl. 230, 235, something like that. He is fast. Look at these grades. I think he led all of college football in a receiving grade, 96.3 at PFF, and he can block a little bit, and he'll get after it, even though he's more of a flex tight end due to his size. He would pair very nicely with George Kittle there. He could be a dynamic player. He's good after the catch. I think you start talking about
kind of an kind of like Dallas Clark.
Yeah, here's
Kyle Juszczyk, a little Delaney Walker.
Yeah,
he's he's kind of in that ilk. Now Delaney Walker, who was a receiver at like Central Missouri Division II school, but he was like 6'2", 240 in college. So he was always going to have to transition into something else potentially. How well does Fannin run? But I mean, he was terrific with ball skills. I think at the Senior Bowl, watched him run routes. It didn't look as smooth.
He's tight.
As I did with
for a small. We all these guys are like oily hipped tight ends that we just mentioned. Fannin's not really that. He's more straight line upfield explosive. Like he doesn't really turn all that well. So he's not like Travis Kelce on third down. He's a jitterbug and going to get open. He's more like go at you, go hit the seam, go catch and run type of a guy. Yeah, you could put him in the backfield a little bit and do some things, but he's not, for being an undersized tight end, which is why he would still be here in the third round. I think there's a chance he is. So he's not a wide tight end. So some teams might not like him because he's not that big, but he's not the quickest, oily hipped, like in and out of breaks tight end either.
Kind of like Isaiah Likely. Now, Likely didn't run very well, so that made him drop in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
But it's similar, where didn't test very well, but was a hell of a pass catching tight end at Coastal Carolina. Gets drafted to the Baltimore Ravens, and I mean, we saw him be able to really contribute to a good football team, especially when Andrews went down.
Yeah, I mean, he's just a good football player, and you could use him in a ton of ways. He could go with George Kittle too. It's not like he has to play the exact role and wouldn't play the exact role George Kittle plays. He had 1,500 receiving yards, 1,550, like one of the craziest tight end seasons ever, 10 touchdowns. Dude's a baller, and I think that's going to be the pick here for me, Croc. What do you think?
I would, because you're picking at 75, you have picked 99 as well. I would see if there's somebody I just feel like potentially is a little bit more talented higher. And if not, then all right, you could take him right now.
I'd be looking at Azariah Thomas, corner from Florida State. That worked out well for the 49ers last year in the draft. You could go back to that. Or Nick Imanwari, safety. But again, like this is looking like an up the middle draft. Tight end, safety, potentially. We already got a guard. That's what Big Jonah out of Arizona is going to be in the NFL. I'm not drafting Dylan Gabriel. I think that's ranked way too high for what he is in the NFL. So yeah, it comes down to Azariah Thomas, Nick Imanwari, and maybe Trey Harris. I think he'd be a fit for the 49ers. Might need a little more wide receiver now. Or Harold Fannin Jr., Croc.
I'd go at Harold Fannin. Those guys we just mentioned. Yeah.
Harold Fannin Jr.
Immediate need, like the 49ers need a tight end too, and they need somebody that can, be versatile, and he's definitely that. And he's not just people hear us, you don't need versatile, you need a guy that's good at no, he is good at tight end. But
no, yeah, he's good.
The way that you are able to utilize him, you can move him around and do all kind of things with him. So if you're not ready for him to just, hey, you got to replace George Kittle, and he won't ever replace everything that Kittle gives you, but he is able to do so much that it's a good pick.
You know who he could replace potentially in the long run is Juwan Jennings. Because Jennings, I think, only has one more year left on his deal. Do you pay him again? Power slot, big player, move him around. And I think Kyle Shanahan could put a guy like that to use. A little positionless football on offense for the 49ers. All right, last pick we're going to make here. And we are down to pick number 99 at the end of round 3. We got the Oregon wide receiver. Tez Johnson is the number 1 on the board here. Do you start looking at maybe some backup quarterbacks to develop behind Brock Purdy? I think the Niners will take a quarterback on day 3 of the draft. I don't know if 99 is too high. Will Howard and Jalen Milroe are the 2 highest quarterbacks on the list. You got a guard out of Georgia, Tate Ratledge. You got a center out of Georgia, Jared Wilson. You got Jordan Phillips, defensive tackle out of Maryland there. DJ Giddens is a really good player, running back out of Kansas State that I wouldn't be super against at this point in the draft, just adding best player. If a running back is the best player at 99, the Niners haven't been great at 99 and they've missed, but you just got to draft the right quarterback or the right running back. It's not like you take running backs off the board altogether. You got to have good players at that position, but you got to draft the right guy if you're going to draft a guy even as high as the 3rd round. And the Niners have done that wrong.
Well, the guy that I like the most right here, and I feel like you get really good value on, is probably Will Howard, the quarterback out of Ohio State. This is a guy that obviously proven that he can win. Just watching his growth over the last 2 years as a quarterback, and even looking at what they did with Chip Kelly. I mean, there were a lot of different passing concepts, and this was a guy who time and time again made the timely throws, was able to throw with anticipation. The different things that they threw at him to be creative with their weapons, whether it was Smith, and Mbuka, I mean, the 2 running backs, they did all kind of different things. I felt like he executed that at a high level for Chip Kelly. So, this is a guy who I feel like the 49ers, again, it's not like you're trying to put pressure on Brock Purdy, but to get somebody behind Brock Purdy that you feel like, hey, man, just over the next 4 years, you don't have to be the guy, but can you be a good, reliable guy? Because one thing about Brock Purdy so far, he's been hurt. He's been hurt multiple different times. So you're not looking for a replacement to Brock, but you are looking for someone who, hey, man, like, if Brock goes down, we really like this guy, and we didn't have to spend a 1st or 2nd round pick on him.
I was really impressed with Will Howard watching the tournament. Hold on a second, though. I didn't see Makuba here. Andrew Makuba, safety out of Texas. He is a 6 foot 190. If you're trying to get someone who has some range, who could play a little bit of slot for you, he's a really good player. I might throw his name on the list here as a potential draft pick at this spot. And we haven't done anything in the secondary yet. We've passed on a couple of potential cornerbacks here with the last couple picks in the 2nd and 3rd round. Do you come back with the defensive back here that could compete?
Ooh, I just see the corner. Now, this is a guy that you may be able to get in the 4th round, but Noel Williams, the cornerback out of California, he's very impressive.
Is he? Let's see. 6'1", 200. Do you go the poor man's Brian Branch in the Texas DB in Andrew Makuba, or do you go with the poor man's I don't know who he'd be the poor man's version of, the poor man's Siobhan Revelle, or anybody that we passed on in this draft? Get yourself a potential starting caliber. Look, corner is something the 49ers need. They need a 3rd guy long term behind Green and Demo. If he gets
that kid right there, he's good. No Williams
gets the Eric Crocker stamp of approval, pick 99.
He can play.
I'm okay with it.
He can play some ball. I didn't know he was that big either. Yeah,
that's the pick. I mean, he might not actually be that big. We know how those listed weights go. So there we go. That's where we're going to end this one. And that was fun. Little trade down. Got an extra player in there. We ended up with Walter Nolan, Tyler Booker, Jihad Campbell, Harold Fannin, Noel Williams. 5 picks in the first 3 rounds. I think it's a phenomenal haul. Croc, great job assisting me as AGM, but this goes on my record as a phenomenal draft. I want you to know that. So now you got something to shoot for when we do this again, and I will assist you in our next mock draft here. So let us know what you guys think at BD Peacock, at Crocky209 in the YouTube comments. Thanks for tuning in. And we got a lot more mock drafts to come, a lot more prospects to get into here on Locked On 49ers. Back tomorrow.